Today's thought of the day, episode 43, is about the dehumanization of war. Dehumanization is the psychological process of demonizing the enemy, making them seem less like than a human and hence not worthy of humane treatment. This can lead to increased violence, human rights violations, war crimes, and genocide. Dehumanization is a very common theme in the world history. The history of warfare and the history of mass violence. Some of the rhetoric we have seen in ongoing conflict is disturbingly familiar. Talking about the enemy as non-human forms. Such dehumanization breaks down moral inhibitions by reducing perceptions of victims as fellow human beings, worthy of concern. That is extremely dangerous because once the enemy is described as a monster, nothing stops you from complete elimination of your enemy, and that is the recipe for genocide. According to Taylor, human beings will never be totally secure, especially not on a planet that has been destabilized. We need to cultivate an ethic of insecurity, one that acknowledges and embraces our existential insecurity while resisting manufactured insecurity imposed upon us. The experience of insecurity, she says, can offer us a path to wisdom, a wisdom that can guide not only our personal lives but also our collective endeavors. What is needed to respect the principles of coexistence, non interference, and respect for sovereignty. Live and let live is a fascinating idea to the extent that as long as some power has not simply trespassed and occupy your home. Throughout history, instances of dehumanization have been prevalent both in pre-modern times and the modern era. Here are a few examples. The first is a Roman Empire in pre-modern times. The Roman practice of slavery involved the dehumanization of enslaved individuals, stripping them of rights and treating them as property rather than as human beings. Then comes the Crusades. During the Crusades, 11th and 13th centuries, there were instances of dehumanization between different religious groups, with each side viewing the other as infidels or enemies of God. Dehumanization was regularly employed by European powers as they colonized, enslaved, and exterminated other groups. For example, during the colonization of Ireland by the English starting in the 17th century, the Irish were regularly depicted in newspapers as culturally inferior, irrational, and prone to violence. Then comes the modern times, World War II and the Holocaust. The Nazis systematically dehumanized Jews and other targeted minorities or targeted groups, portraying them as racially inferior. Propaganda labeling and the establishment of concentration camps were part of this dehumanization process. Another example is Rwandan genocide, 1994. The Hutu ethnic majority dehumanized the Tutsi minority using radio broadcasts and propaganda to depict them as cockroaches. This dehumanization contributed to the brutal genocide that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. The other one is Bosnian War, 1992 1995. Instances of dehumanization occurred during the conflict in Bosnia, where different ethnic and religious groups were targeted based on their identity. This included mass killings and atrocities. Iraq War, 2003 and 2011. In various aspects of the Iraq War, including the Abu Ghraib prison scandal, where the abuse of detainees showcased a dehumanizing mindset among military personnel. The current ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. It is a war between state and non-state actors. There is a history of dehumanization between the two. Understanding these historical examples is crucial for recognizing the patterns of dehumanization, and devastating its devastating consequences on individuals and societies. It also underscores the importance of promoting empathy, tolerance, and respect to prevent the recurrence of such dehumanizing behaviors. The question of whether dehumanization at war committed by a UN member nation and a non state actor should undergo similar retribution is subjective and depends on various factors. Here are few considerations. The first one is legal framework. International law establishes different legal obligation for states and non-state actors. UN member nations are bound by international conventions, treaties, and customary international law, which may provide avenues for legal accountability and retribution. Non state actors, on the other hand, may be subject to different legal frameworks, such as international humanitarian law or domestic laws of the countries affected. Number two, state responsibility. Some argue that UN member nations have a higher responsibility to uphold human rights. International law due to their formal recognition as sovereign entities. As such, they bear greater accountability for their actions, including instances of dehumanization during war. Non state actors may not have the same legal obligations or recognition, which could impact the nature and level of retributions. Israeli state officials use language in public during the current war that can be termed dehumanization. They called Hamas monsters, which means a signal for their forces for complete elimination of the enemy, and that is a recipe for genocide. Number three, scale and impact. The scale and impact of dehumanization can vary between UN member nations and non state actors. Member nations typically have more significant resources, military capabilities, and control over territories, which could lead to larger scale and more systematic dehumanization. The severity and consequences of the dehumanization can influence the retribution deemed appropriate. Number four, international relations and politics. The response to dehumanization may also be influenced by geopolitical considerations and diplomatic relationships. UN member nations may face diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, or legal action from the international community if they engage in severe dehumanization. Non state actors, especially those without official recognition, may face different types of pressure, negotiations, or military interventions. In summary, the question of whether similar retributions should apply to dehumanization committed by a UN member nation and a non state actor is complex. It depends on legal frameworks, state responsibilities, the scale and impact of dehumanization, and political dynamics. Ultimately, the pursuit of justice, accountability, and the prevention of future atrocities should be the guiding principles in determining appropriate retributions. In the end, it is imperative that a massive exercise should be conducted to record all human rights violations as well as genocide experienced by any community, smaller or bigger, in the world in the past. Recognizing such acts will mean addressing the helpless and vulnerable people in the world. After that, process of addressing can start, which will include justice and reconciliation. in world politics, examining cases of colonial war, dispossession, forced labor, forcible incorporation, and genocide. Thank you and have a good day.